So we'll go ahead and get started again, because I know Dorinda has to go to bells, and I want
Yeah, we don't have it if you want practice.
be sensitive to that. So I'm going to let you listen to Nabil Qureshi. He was if you don't know who this guy was, you should get to know him. He's passed, but his conversion story is just amazing. But he was a Muslim, out to convert Christians to Islam. And all right, let's listen to Nabil Qureshi. And again, he's going to reiterate some of the things we've been talking about, but his perspective is different. And I want you to hear a little bit about his perspective.
What are the sources regarding Christianity? And some of you might be even asking, Nabil, why should I even believe Jesus is real? Why should I ever even believe that he's a man who existed? The first thing I'm going to start off by telling you is that it is incontrovertible, according to the historical principles of investigation, that a man named Jesus existed in the first century. How do we know this? We have over 40 records of Jesus' life from ancient times, describing this man who is essentially a carpenter in Palestine. He didn't have much of anything. He wasn't a centrally important figure at the time, yet we have 40 sources that refer to him. You know who the emperor was at Jesus' time? Someone shout it out. Tiberius. Good. Tiberius was the emperor of Rome at that time. Now, this is a man who obviously we should have a lot written about. We can expect tons and tons of records about this man, can't we? The historical records contain Tiberius' name by 10 different individuals. That's it. 10 for Tiberius, the emperor of Rome, 40 for Jesus. You can see we have excellent reason to believe that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, lived and existed in the first century. And that's why very, very few, in fact, I could probably count it on one hand, actually, I know of two, scholars who study the historical Jesus actually claim that Jesus never existed. And one of them is Bob Price, who most other scholars say is just not even possible what he says. So we can dismiss, just due to the reasoning and due to the lack of scholastic support, that this is actually the case. So Jesus certainly exists. Okay, what can we know about him? Well, of the scholars that study him, and keep in mind, there is an entire area of historical studies called historical Jesus studies. So we have scholars who've been studying this on all sides. These aren't all Christians by any means. Actually, the most influential ones wouldn't align themselves with Orthodox Christianity. You have people like Paula Fredrickson, Marcus Borg, Bart Ehrman. You have people along these lines who would say, like John Dominic Crossan, who would say that of Jesus we can know for a fact that he died on the cross. Now keep in mind, that's one of our 3 points that we're proving for Christianity, or attempting to show to determine its reliability. Did Jesus die on the cross? The scholars who study his life, regardless of whether they're atheist, Buddhist, agnostic, Hindu, Christian, it doesn't matter. They all conclude that Jesus died on the cross. Now, if I left it there, it would be an appeal to authority, and we're trying to be academically rigorous tonight, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you some of their reasons why they believe Jesus died on the cross, but we're going to keep it brief because scholars are unanimous on this issue. By the way, it's not just them. Even Muslim scholars will argue that Jesus did die on the cross. How many of you heard of Reza Aslan's book recently, Zealots, that came out this year? A few of you? Reza Aslan's a scholar who has studied the historical Jesus. And as a Muslim, he says, yes, Islam denies Jesus' death on the cross, and I am a Muslim, but I confirm that Jesus' death on the cross is historically certain. In fact, he builds his whole book off the fact that Jesus died on the cross. So even as a Muslim, he says Jesus died on the cross. So why? Why do they say this? Well, because first off, all the evidence that we have, all the records of Jesus' life, which talk about his death, indicate that he did die. If they say anything, it says that he did die on the cross under Pontius Pilate, which is why Paula Fredrickson says, if there's anything we can know about Jesus, anything at all, it's this, that he died on the cross under Pontius Pilate.
So it's just a taste of Nabil. And I think the main point that he was making is Muslim scholars who are willing to just let the evidence take them where it is admit that Jesus has to have died on the cross, even though Islam denies it. Islam believes in the story of Jesus. You know, everything that's captured in our Bible about Jesus except the deity and the resurrection. Because they don't, and the death on the cross, because they don't think he was ever killed, because the prophet of God wouldn't die that way, I guess. So I think with strong conviction, we can say that we have historical evidence that is very difficult to refute for Jesus. There's no question that the deity claims of Jesus date back at least to the first century. in documented form, and that non-Christians affirm that he died by crucifixion at the hands of the Romans. So those objections, well, people can still have them. We can't necessarily convince people. If they are reasonable and willing to look at the evidence that is available, there's no evidence to the contrary. So that brings us to the last one, and this is the essence of Christianity is based around whether Jesus was really who he said he was, which means he has to have risen from the dead, the resurrection. So we have several alternative theories, but there's the stolen body theory, which is actually, we have a frog in here, sorry. It's a toad somewhere in here. Oh well. Something got in. It likes the atrium. The stolen body theory is actually captured in the Bible for us. There's the wrong tomb theory, which that one will probably make you laugh a little bit. The evil twin, this is a real theory. The hallucination, and then the conspiracy theory. So these are the main theories, and actually there are a lot of other theories. In fact, there are 2 books. If you're interested in this, these 2 books will give you more information than you thought even existed. Holding's book, Defending the Resurrection, gives all these alternate theories. When I was reading this book, I couldn't stop laughing at some of the theories, because they're based on no evidence. It's just this imagination, right? Which is okay. And then William Lane Craig's, his Sunrises, his historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus is really good at laying out in kind of plain words what we've kind of been talking about. If you're looking for a reference book, I like both of those. So, okay, let's just look at one of these alternative theories while the frog croaks at me over here. The wrong tomb theory. So, the concept of the wrong tomb theory is they didn't know which tomb to go to, so when they went to the tomb, it was empty because there was never a body in it. And that's how we got the resurrection story, that Jesus was buried someplace else, and those stupid women didn't know where to go, is really what it comes down to, okay? They went to the wrong one, because the disciples didn't know where to go because they weren't watching. So we trusted the women didn't know, and so it's the Bible account is just women being confused. Yeah. But that's the idea. And that Jesus is still in some tomb someplace, according to this theory.
Sculptor said that it was stolen.
Yes. The Bible account itself kind of refutes this idea, because the Pharisees, who 2 of their members buried Jesus, would have probably known where they buried him, and their best argument was the body got stolen. So this theory kind of falls apart with the Bible account. Plus, there are witnesses, not Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus at least. We have Roman soldiers that are guarding the tomb that we know Pilate sent. They probably went to the right tomb.
They put a seal on it.
They put a seal on it. And then the women, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and I think Salome is the third one that's often stated, followed them and watched where he was laid, is what it says in the Bible account. So this is a very weak alternative theory, and it was never used until recent times. This is a modern invented theory. I was going to say concocted. That's probably a little mean. It's invented in the modern world. It's pretty tough to trace back to see exactly where this came from. I was not able to find the actual origins of this theory, other than it's one of those, I just put a big question mark. It's like...
They were too embarrassed to put their name to it.
Well, it's probably in this book down here by Holding, but the whole idea is there's no corroboration from historical accounts. There's no corroboration from the Bible accounts. There are plenty. If there really was a body in another tomb, why wouldn't the religious leaders went and got the body and said, "Hey, this is it. This is what Frank Turek was saying," right? So we'll say this one: if someone gives you this, be kind and just tell them, why do you think that? Why wouldn't the religious leaders of the day have known that enough to bring this up? And that's where this argument falls apart. The next is the evil twin. And when I read this in the book, I could not stop laughing. It was very difficult. So the evil twin theory, there's several different variations on this, but the idea that Jesus either had a twin or there was someone that looked like Jesus. Either way, it works the same way, that after he died, that this guy showed up, and that's the reason they didn't recognize him. He was a little different. Okay, so someone impersonated Jesus. Now there's a twist on this one. There's several variations of. Another one is that the Romans did the switcheroo, and they put somebody else on the cross as his evil twin. So there's a lot of variations on this. They all fall apart the same way. All I can put up here is question marks, because it's like, okay, so I can imagine this, but is it real? Sometime in the life of Jesus, you don't think Mary knew she had a twin? And if it was a close enough follower of Jesus to be able to impersonate Jesus, don't you think the followers of Jesus would know who it was? I mean, those are only two options.
It's still this question. Who is willing to die for a lie?
Well, this is one of these where they didn't recognize it was a lie, right? But again, it doesn't explain where that person went. There's just a lot of questions. This is one of those that's very inventive. It's very imaginative. But I think if you ask questions of someone that believes this, it tends to implode on itself. It's like you couldn't pull this off in today's world, even with makeup and art. So why do we think it could have happened in the first century? The next one is, sorry, I didn't advance. So this is the evil twin. The next one's the hallucination. This is another one that you kind of have to just... Okay, so the way this goes is that one or more... You had 500 people that saw Jesus at the same time, but they didn't really see Jesus at the same time. They thought they saw Jesus at the same time, and they had this vision or hallucination, and all the hallucinations were exactly the same. And not just those 500, but the disciples had a hallucination that was the same, and all 13, which we know there are probably more like 75 people in the room, had the same hallucination. The brothers of Jesus had the same hallucination, and Paul had some similar hallucination, all thinking they saw Jesus and not really seeing Jesus. And when they spoke about it, they believed all there was the same. And they claim that group hallucination is a medical and historical fact. And there are such things as group hallucinations. That probably happened in the 60s a lot with the drugs and all kinds of things. But the groups of people are all having hallucinations, but it's not the same hallucination, okay? There's no evidence that you can have the same hallucination that somebody else has. Now, someone can tell you a story and you can believe it, but to have this idea that everybody had a hallucination and it's exactly the same, the only time that things similar to this have been recorded is when they see a dead person. You see these where the dead person came to me and talked to me, and it came to somebody else and talked to them, and they'll say this ghost or someone came. But when they recant the story, all the parts of the story are part of history, things that they have experienced with that person. There's no new information. That's the key part of those type of events, where people see things that are similar in different locations, but they're remembering things from history. And that's where that vision comes from. Jesus gave new information during these appearances. So to call those hallucinations or visions, they don't match anything else in history. And so the group hallucination, again, all I can do is put up question marks, because it's like, it's really difficult to support this, because if you're going to make a claim, you have to provide evidence. And evidence can't be what I can imagine. Evidence has to be something that I can see. And written history, medical history, some sort, something. But just because we think it doesn't make it true. And there's no doubt that the disciples were in a mental state where they were probably in extreme grief. But in order to have this switch, because they admit in the Gospels that they did not recognize that Jesus was really saying he was going to die and rise from the dead. He said it over and over again, but the Gospel accounts themselves say that they didn't understand until after he had rose again. So he hasn't rose again yet. They didn't have it in their minds yet. And that's what the Bible story tells us. That's what the evidence outside the Bible tells us. So hallucination theory, probably not.